These days, most couples choose to have a civil marriage celebrant perform their wedding ceremony. Today, I'm talking with celebrant Dean Mason. So, Dean, why are couples choosing civil marriage celebrants?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. I think some of the most simple reasons are that people aren't as religious as they used to be, or perhaps the couple have different religious outlooks that they can't quite agree on one or the other, so it's a good middle road. There's also the fact that using a civil celebrant, you can get married anywhere you want. So a lot of people choose to get married somewhere that's close to the reception, can be a factor driving it. And also that when you use a civil celebrant, you really get to put your own unique stamp on it. It's not like a traditional ceremony where you have to do this, this and this.
Oh, it's great to have that flexibility, especially in Australia when there's so many great outdoor venues. So what are the components of a modern wedding ceremony?
I think the thing is when you're designing a modern ceremony to remember that there's a couple of things that have to be in there, but other than that, you really have free range to make it what you want, and it's a really great way to use it as a reflection of who you are as a couple, who you are as people, so it can be fun and elegant and stylish, but still have the seriousness that's required of getting married.
So what does a ceremony have to include in order for it to be a binding marriage?
So some of the essential things that are generally in there is there's something called the monitum, which is a part that legally has to be in there as a celebrant, where I remind you of what the legal definition of marriage is. You need to exchange wedding vows with each other. So you're basically, making a declaration for the future and a promise for the future, and you need to reflect in those vows that you're calling on the people that are there to be your witnesses in that. Most people will exchange rings. You don't have to do that these days, that's not one of the legal requirements. One thing that you do have to do is you need to have 2 witnesses to sign the marriage certificates with you. Now, those witnesses can be anyone you like, as long as they're over the age of 18, but that can often be a nice place to include people that special people that you want to include in the ceremony. So some people get brothers or sisters, can be a great place for best friends. Sometimes it's a really nice way to include the mums in the ceremony, because sometimes they get overlooked a little bit. Or a really nice one too is if your grandparents are going to be there, of using your grandparents to witness your wedding certificate.
Oh yes, I love including family in a ceremony. So what are some of the ways couples can make their ceremony unique?
There's 1,000 ways that you can make your wedding ceremony unique. As long as you've covered off the basics of the legalities, the rest of it is up to you. So it can come down to the type of music that you play. I've had couples that were actors that had friends of theirs do a little performance. I've had, instead of doing like a traditional reading, I've had couples that have got their friends to stand up and read song lyrics, but read them quite seriously, so it's not until about halfway through that the actual congregation realised that they were listening to the lyrics of a Kylie Minogue song. I know another couple that when they got married, they pulled out their mobile phones and Facebooked their last moment of singledom. So there's really all kinds of ways, and different ways that you can include special people, like if you have blended families, of working out ways for kids to be in the ceremony. Sometimes I've had younger brothers or children that get involved in the ceremony by helping me out with the very special job of announcing when it's time for the couple to kiss. And a really clever thing that I saw a bride do was, when there was a lot of kids at the ceremony, was she gave each kid, when they arrived, a glass of lollies that was all wrapped up with a little note on it saying, please open this at the beginning of the ceremony and thank you for keeping quiet during the ceremony. So she basically just filled them up with lollies so they didn't talk all the way through the ceremony.
Personalisation is a big thing these days. So have you got any more ideas on how a bride can make their ceremony quite unique?
Again, a lot of it comes down to how you involve other people in the ceremony. So I've had some clients that, with a wedding day, so much of it is planned down to an inch of your life. So sometimes by the time the actual day rolls around, it's nice to have a couple of components where you can just relax and enjoy and have a bit of a surprise. So in the way that I write the ceremony, I'll often interview the couple, the bride and the groom, separately and use their own words in the ceremony, but get them to not tell each other what their answers were, so that on the day they're hearing what their special person thought of them when they met or what their first impression was, but they're hearing it for the first time on the day of the wedding. And I've also had some clients that obviously you could only do this with trusted friends, but they've had friends or nieces and nephews write something special instead of doing a set reading, and then again they hear it for the first time during the actual wedding ceremony. And I think that's really nice for the for all of your guests that are there as well, so that they're not just hearing the same old thing that that they've heard at 1,000 different ceremonies before.
Oh, that's a great idea. So the kids can actually write their own ideas on love and marriage and can get up and read it at the wedding ceremony on the day.
I've had couples that do something like that. I've had some nieces and nephews of the bride that gave their impression of what they thought the couple were like together, what they thought of the groom when he came to the first family dinner, things like that. And I think sometimes couples get a little bit scared to step out of the square like that, and I've had couples comment especially that they're a little bit scared of how some of the oldies at the ceremony will react, but I can guarantee it's the oldies that usually enjoy it the most, because don't forget, these are the people that have been to 100 different weddings. So when they see something that's a little bit different and that reflects the personality and the nature of the couple who are close and special to them, they enjoy it a lot more as well.
Okay, we spoke a little bit about the vows. How have vows been modernised these days?
The thing with vows is there's one or two lines that legally have to be in there, and your celebrant will be able to tell you what they are. But other than that, you really have free reign, and the thing to remember is that you are making a promise for the future. So you want it to be sentimental and special and have a degree of seriousness to it, but there's no reason you can't have a bit of fun in there as well. I've had a couple that were he was a mad keen cyclist, so she made reference to the fact that she never thought she'd be marrying a man that had that much lycra in his wardrobe 20 years past the 80s. I've had other couples that, make promises about, sharing the TV remote, about that they will, promising that they'll never eat the last chocolate biscuit and pretend it wasn't them. You can really do what you want with that. I've also had a couple of couples that choose to write their own vows, do it separately, both show them to me so that I can check that the legalities are covered, but again, let the other person hear it for the first time on the day. So again, it's just adding that element of, a little bit of surprise and something that's not planned. So.
And some of the wedding traditions, they're so nice, but so how have they been modernised these days? How have some of the traditions been modernised?
There's a number of things that people have modernised. The first one is where people stand. So in a traditional ceremony in a church, you'll have the groom, you'll have the bride, separate sides of the aisle. For most of the ceremony, their back is to their guests. Whereas if you're going to do a modern ceremony not in a church, that's not a tradition that you need to keep. So I'll often have the bride and groom standing next to me, next to each other, so that they can, talk to each other during the ceremony, and so that their guests can see them. It's the biggest day of their life. Another one is in a traditional ceremony where the celebrant or the priest would say, does anyone object to this, wedding taking part? Speak now or forever hold your tongue. That's pretty much gone. And one way that we sort of still can include the guests in the ceremony is then at that point where you would have asked that question to ask, does everyone here support this beautiful couple in their marriage? Which I've never had a no, thank goodness. Another place where you can modernise a traditional aspect of the ceremony is with the bride being given away by her father. It's still a nice thing to include, but some people aren't so keen on the actual phrase being given away. So another way around that is to say who presents this woman to be married to this wonderful man.
Okay, so what about some inside tips, some celebrant secrets?
There's quite a few things for the day that can make the day go a lot smoother, and they're things that you just don't think of. So, for example, when you were saying your wedding vows, so there's a couple of different ways you can do it. I'd recommend not trying to memorise it, because it'll be hot, you'll be nervous. So generally the celebrant will be feeding you those your vows line by line. Remember to look at each other. Sometimes when I'm giving the words to people, the natural inclination is that because I'm speaking to you, you'll look at me, and I kind of have to go, you're not marrying me, you're marrying them, look at each other. So that's one thing. Another really good trick is, again, because it's hot and because you're nervous, on the day I turn up with a little tube of Vaseline and we grease the inside of the rings so that when you get to that point, the ring just slides on nicely, because there's nothing worse than being at a wedding and people trying to get the ring on. Another thing is when you're choosing the location of the ceremony, people are daydreaming about their perfect location, but they're not actually considering the weather. So most weddings are at 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Often it's really hot. So I always try and bring a little bottle of water for the groom, because often he's nervous and his mouth is dry, and just so he can have a couple of sips of water before the ceremony starts. And to consider your guests as well, because there's nothing worse as a guest, especially as a woman, when you get all frocked up, beautiful makeup, beautiful hair, and then you're standing there sweating like nothing on earth right before a ceremony. Another really good thing to sort of include in your wedding ceremony is for someone at the end of the ceremony, whether it's your celebrant or a best man, or it can also be a really nice way for the celebrant to introduce the person that's going to be your MC for the night, to stand up and just give everyone a little update on what's going to happen from here. Because yes, you've printed it on the invite, but probably no one's looked at that for a while and everyone's kind of wrapped up in the moment. It's nice just to fill people in on, is there going to be drinks over here? Do you want everyone to stay around for a photo? What time do people need to be back at a certain spot to kick off, the big celebration? So it's really nice to have someone give the crowd an update.
The mums can sometimes feel a bit left out. How can we include our mum more in a ceremony?
I know, the poor mums. I mean, it's the biggest day of a mother's life, watching one of her kids get married. So it is nice to find a way to include the mums in the ceremony. So some of the ways that you can do that is to have the mums be your witness. Or another really nice aspect, because often in a modern ceremony as well, people aren't having, the 6 bridesmaids and the 6 groomsmen and the best man and that sort of thing. So when it comes time to actually present the rings, it can be really nice if the mums are the people that come forward with the rings. So, the bride's mum has her ring and the groom's mum has his ring, and that's a really nice way for the mums to be involved. And it's almost that sort of last moment of mothering your children. So that's a nice way to do it.
Well, thank you so much, Dean. There is so many great ideas there for us. So the wedding ceremony, it really is the most important part of the whole day. So spend a little time on it and you will never regret it.